Chapter 32, Section 4, The Allied Victory. In 1942, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin planned the Allies' strategy. Stalin wanted Britain and the United States to attack Germany to relieve the pressure on his armies. They agreed, but chose to attack in North Africa. In late 1942, the British Army drove the Germans out of Egypt and back to the west. Meanwhile, American troops landed behind the Germans and began moving east. The Germans were finally forced to abandon Africa in May of 1943. At the same time, the Soviets enjoyed a major victory. German troops had invaded the Soviet city of Stalingrad in 1942, and the Red Army forced the Germans to surrender in February of 1943. American and British soldiers next invaded Italy and captured Sicily. Mussolini was forced from power, and the new Italian government surrendered. Hitler was unwilling to give up Italy. His army fought fiercely there until 1945. While the Allied armies fought, people at home suffered. Some British and Soviet citizens died. In the United States, citizens faced shortages. Goods such as food, tires, gasoline, and clothing were in short supply. The government rationed these items, limiting how much a person could have, to make sure that there was enough for the armies. Some Americans were even imprisoned. Since bitter feelings against the Japanese became widespread, mistrust of Americans of Japanese heritage grew. The U.S. government gathered thousands of Japanese Americans who lived on the West Coast and forced them to move to concentration camps in the western United States. 2/3 of them were American citizens. In early 1944, the Allies built a massive force to retake France. In June, an invasion of thousands of ships, planes, and soldiers were launched. The Allies suffered heavy losses, but gained control of northern France. A month later, Allied forces broke out and began to pour through German lines. By September, the Allies had forced the Germans out of France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and much of the Netherlands. At the same time, the Soviets were pushing the Germans back in Eastern Europe. In late 1944, Hitler ordered his army to make one final large-scale attack in the West. The Battle of the Bulge. It punched through Allied lines until an Allied counterattack forced it back to Germany. By late April 1945, Soviet troops surrounded Berlin, Hitler's headquarters. Hitler killed himself, and a week later, the Germans surrendered. Roosevelt had not lived to see this victory, however. He had died in early April. Harry Truman was now the President of the United States. In the Pacific, Allies advanced on Japanese territory starting in 1943. By the fall of 1944, they had landed troops in the Philippines. The Japanese sent their remaining ships to try to destroy the U.S. Navy near the Philippines. In the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944, the Japanese lost badly and their navy was crushed. American troops began to move closer to Japan. In March 1945, they captured an island called Iwo Jima. By June, they had won control of Okinawa, an island just 350 miles from Japan. Japan was the next stop, but the U.S. military feared that an invasion of Japan would cost 500,000 Allied lives. In August, President Truman ordered an experimental atomic bomb dropped on the city of Hiroshima to try to quickly end the war. 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Tens of thousands of Japanese died. In September, Japan surrendered.